Well, welcome everybody to the last garden hour of May. Hard to believe that we are almost in June already. Summer is kicking off. I am Amanda Bachman. I'll be your host tonight from the Pierre Regional Center, SDSU Extension's Pesticide Education and Urban Entomology Field Specialist. And joining me tonight, we have Dr. John Ball and Whitney Keller-Reitz. So John, what will you be covering for us tonight?
Well, tonight I'm going to cover a little bit of emerald ash borer, of course, because they're flying. And then Bugageddon, we're going to be talking about the pine looper in the Black Hills that may be coming soon. So that's a good tease for tonight.
Awesome. I also have a Bugageddon as well, more in people's garages, so a little bit less, economically terrifying. And Whitney, welcome to your first garden hour. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to be covering tonight.
Yeah, so my name is Whitney Reitz, and I am based out of the Watertown Regional Center. I am a health and community field specialist there, and I will be talking about drying herbs tonight. So
Awesome. I just bought some, like basil and things to put in my garden that I need to actually plant so they can get big enough that I can do something with them. If you are ready to go, we will go ahead and start with you. And for folks in the audience, while Whitney is getting her screen sharing going, feel free to keep an eye on the chat for links as we're going along. And if you have a question at any point for any of our presenters, go ahead and put that in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and I will sort of make sure to field that to our different panelists at the end of their segment, or if we have time at the very end of garden hour. So Whitney, your slides look great. I will turn it over to you.
all right, thank you, Amanda. Good evening, everybody. My name is Whitney Reitz, and this is my very first garden hour. So thanks for letting me join and talk to you all. So I kind of just introduced myself, but a little background on me and why I'm speaking tonight. I'm originally from Northeast South Dakota. I graduated twice from SDSU, first in 2018 with my Bachelor of Science, and then again in 2021 with my Master of Public Health. I started with SDSU Extension just this winter, and I am a health and community field specialist, like I just said. And I recently joined Claudia Botzit on the Master Food Preserver team. So I am new to the gardening arena, but I'm very excited about it. So then, like I said, tonight I'm going to be talking about drying herbs, and kind of chose this with Amanda because of the early garden harvests. And like I said, I am new to this team, so I will try to field your questions as best as I can. But if I do not know the answer, I will point you in the right direction. All right, so drying is one of the easiest ways to extend the life of herbs. There's 4 methods to dry herbs: air drying, microwaving, using an oven, and of course using a dehydrator. So the first method is air drying. To air dry, you need to pick a location with low humidity and good air circulation for 5 to 10 days. Tie sturdy herbs like rosemary, thyme, parsley, and sage together into small bundles and hang them to air dry away from a sink, stove, or dishwasher. These appliances can increase humidity in the area. Tender leaf herbs such as basil, oregano, and mint can be hung inside paper bags to dry, as they have a higher moisture content and can mold easier. Air circulation is achieved by tearing holes in the sides of the bags. Suspend the bunch in the middle of the bag and close the top with a rubber band. The bag acts as a dust shield or a seed catcher for seedy herbs. And then small leaved herbs can be laid out in a single layer on a tray covered with paper towels to dry. Herbs can be dried up to 5 layers using this method. So the next method we have is using a microwave. Some herbs such as celery, parsley, and basil dry well in the microwave, although microwaves that have a wattage higher than 1000 may heat too fast, making an inappropriate drying method. Make sure to read your manufacturer's instructions before attempting this method. To dry, place herbs in a single layer between 2 paper towels. The amount of herbs and wattage of the microwave will affect the cooking time, but start with 2 to 3 minutes per cup of herbs. After that, you can do every 15 seconds and then mix the herbs and check for doneness. Once dried, removed from the microwave and allow the herbs to cool. And then you can place them in an airtight container for the later use. Next method is the oven method. To start, you're going to set your oven at 180 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Then place herbs in a single layer on a tray, put them in the oven and let dry for 3 to 4 hours with the oven door open. So it's important to note that oven drying can destroy the herb's color, flavor, and oils. We also warn our master food preservers that this method can cause some safety concerns with the open door, especially if you have pets or children running around your home. And then the last method that we use to dry herbs is using a dehydrator. This is the fastest way to dry herbs since it is a controlled temperature and the air circulation is in a controlled environment. To use this method, you need to start by preheating the dehydrator to between 95 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Then place herbs in a single layer on the dehydrator trays and dry between 1 and 4 hours. Dehydrators may vary, so be sure to read your dehydrator's instruction manual before you begin. So here I just kind of noted some helpful tips when drying herbs. For storage and use, dried herbs stored in an airtight container are good for up to 3 months when stored in a cool, dry location, or up to 1 year in the refrigerator or freezer. You can also freeze herbs. This is especially helpful in the event that your herbs don't dry correctly and you're worried about them spoiling. You can just throw them in the freezer and use them that way. Be careful which herbs you mix together when you are drying them. A common issue is drying something like onion with other herbs, which can result in the onion scent and taste transferring to the other herbs. So if you're using something like a dehydrator that has multiple racks and one of the racks you have onion, you might expect that all of your herbs that come out of that are going to taste like onion. So that's just something that people have noticed and that we try to warn people about. SDSU Extension and other extension websites are great resources that are available to everyone. They have just a bunch of great different avenues to drying herbs on them that you guys can use. And then a fun perk with air drying herbs is that they look very pretty in your home. So then, like I said, we have some extension websites that are really great resources for you to use. All the information that I used on this presentation is from our extension resource or other state extension websites. So if you do choose to research it, I highly encourage utilizing these resources. They're all evidence-based and they include a lot of great information. They have how-tos on how to dry herbs, freeze herbs, and then lots of other food preservation information as well. And then they also have recipes, and all of these recipes are evidence-based. So you can trust that they are going to be, you're going to get the results that you expect to get from them. So I attached 3 different resources here. The first one is from the National Center of Home Food Preservation, which the Master Food Preserver team uses quite a bit. And then the second one is our SDSU extension link with a lot of the information that I shared tonight. So that's a great resource with drying herbs or freezing herbs. And then the last one is the University of Minnesota extension website, which also has the different types of preserving and preparing herbs on it. So that is all I have on drying herbs for everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope that you guys learned a little bit about drying herbs. I definitely did when I was researching it. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Whitney. And yeah, if folks have any questions for Whitney, feel free to put those in the Q&A. It looks like you're off the hook for now, but hang out and we'll see if any more questions come in for you. And for folks looking for those resources, you can check the chat for those links. So we're going to move on next to John Ball. So John, can't wait to hear about Bugageddon.
All right, well, let's see here if I can share. And here we go. There we go. All right. Well, first of all, I kind of like that the Whitney's thing there, but I don't see any problems with onion coming through the flavor of anything. What could be bad with onions? But anyway, say, where are we at right now? You know, I typically start out with growing degree days, and Aberdeen has finally warmed up. I mean, if you looked at it a few weeks ago, or if you were one of the unfortunate people that lived there, it appeared you were entering the next ice age because the needle was barely moving. But boy, in this last couple of weeks, it has just zoomed and caught up. We are at about 441 growing degree days in Aberdeen. So, I mean, and it's true. And we talked about it last week too. But if you're in Aberdeen, that progression of flowering, boom, collapsed into about 3 days. So you had almost everything in bloom rather than being stretched out over about a month or so. Rapid City is about where it ought to be. Sioux Falls is actually a little ahead, just a little ahead. And right now what we're seeing in actually across the state, I saw this in Pierre when I was there last week, saw it in Rapid City and down in Sioux Falls where I took this picture. Black locust is in bloom. Now, it's not an outstanding ornamental. It has thorns to it. It kind of lives and dies. But boy, the flowers are incredibly fragrant. They are just wonderful when they're in bloom. But the other thing is, this blooms at the same time. In other words, the same growing degree day requirements as the emergence of emerald ash borer. So we do have a plant that gives us an indication that, guess what? If we accumulate enough warmth for you to bloom, we've accumulated enough warmth for emerald ash borer to begin emerging. And that is the case. Back when EAB was first found in Sioux Falls back in 2018, and I remember finding it, won't forget that date. But then I said, and it was early May, by the way, they hadn't emerged yet. And I said, you know what, in South Dakota, we're going to see emergence right at or right after Memorial Day. And we'll find them flying all the way to about Labor Day. Now, the majority are flying by the end of June, but we always get a few that are kind of late risers. And that's proven true every year. This year was probably one of the first. When I was out checking on Memorial Day, the first emergence was occurring. And now they're usually not this well behaved. Amanda knows the trick to this. Catch an adult, put it in a freezer for a minute, and then you can put it in your hand. The warmth of your hand is going to make it active. And then before it gets too active, you put it back in a jar, you kill it. But that's the emerald ash borer walking around. You still see a lot that look like that. This one, you know, I pulled the bark away. You might notice it's got kind of a confused look, like, huh? What happened? Because I pulled the bark off, which it hadn't chewed through. And now it's kind of waking up a little early, kind of looking at me like, you know, I expected a couple more days to nap in. But it's just about ready to emerge. And so we've got a few that are beginning to fly. There's always a couple that start out. And the rest ought to be starting to fly by about the end of this week in areas to which emerald ash borer occurs, which again is really the tier of counties from Minnehaha down to Lincoln, down to Union County. Union County, where they were appearing just slightly ahead of Sioux Falls. So the season begins, the flight season at least. But the calls I'm getting on ash, no matter where you live in the state, people think, oh my goodness, I must have emerald ash borer in my trees. And the reason why is your ash trees look horrible. Well, they do. And they've looked horrible at this time of year probably 3 or 4 times in the last 2 decades. And what it is ash anthracnose. We had just enough rain this spring. We haven't had a lot in places, but we have had some. But we had the rain just at the right time for the disease, the wrong time for the tree. In other words, it was wet while they were breaking bud. And because of that, the leaves become infected. And if you look at this, you'll notice that it's got that curling and twisting. Some people see this on their trees and they think, oh my goodness, somebody sprayed herbicide. It's not herbicide at all. It's a fungus disease. And some people notice that they look up at their tree and there's almost as many leaves on the ground as there are in the canopy. It's all due to this disease. And I had a call on it just before the show. I mean, I get calls every day on it now. And it's the usual questions. You know, I'm pretty sure I have EAB. And I know they mean their tree, not themselves, because it doesn't attack people. But I say, well, where do you live? Well, you know, I live in Aberdeen or I live somewhere else. And certainly that's a possibility. So what makes you suspect? Well, it's dropping its leaves. Well, no, that's not a symptom associated with emerald ash borer. That's what we find this fungus disease, ash anthracnose. So that's always followed by another question is, what can I spray? Not a thing. The infection occurred back when the buds were starting to open. I mean, literally just starting to swell and open. And so that's when you would have needed to spray. And spraying now isn't going to do a thing because it's already in the leaves and the leaves are already starting to drop. And we don't recommend you spray in the spring. Why? Because most years we don't see it. We don't get the combination of weather events that we need, cool and moist, long enough to allow this disease to really take hold. So this is just, well, you're going to rake leaves and that's it. But you're in good company. Almost everywhere in the state, you'll see this, not on every tree, not on every ash, and not on every street, but it's noticeable throughout just about every community. And I visited a lot of them as I'm driving around the state, and the ones I haven't visited, I've gotten pictures from. And so back in the day, you might have even just ignored it. But now, of course, with the thought of emerald ash borer, we tend to look at our ash a little bit closer. But this is one of those things you're going to have to worry about when all the ash are dead. How's that? That's one way to look at it. Oh, and look at this. This is pear. Pear's not I'm sorry, Amanda, but pear is not a good place to be a tree. You know, your trees look bad. They're trying to tell you something. Don't plant me here. Soils are crappy. Weather's too dry. There's a lot of bad things. Now, for all you pearites, yes, thank goodness you're planting trees and taking care of them, but it's an uphill fight. And this shows in their ash. I mean, I've gotten calls every year since 2002. Oh, I'm pretty sure my ash tree is emerald ash borer. Where do you live? You live in pear. No, you just live in a bad place to be an ash tree. And so if you look here in pear, you've got this dieback on that. And I've had a number of calls. We think we found it. Now, by the way, sooner or later, emerald ash borer is going to appear in pear. But right now you're looking at dieback. And I want you to look closely at this picture. Do you notice that you've got whole branches dying back? Okay. That's not a symptom pattern associated with emerald ash borer. If you just kind of freeze this in your mind for just a minute, this is emerald ash borer. And this infestation is down near Canton. And if you take a look, you got this bright green, all this flush of bright green growth near the base of the canopy. And then you've got this gap, and then you've got thinning canopy above it. Do you notice that? You got a kind of a layer of thin leaves, then you've got a little opening. You notice all the blue behind it. And then you've got this thick, and I'm going to go backwards here, just again, so you can say, oh yeah, now I see it. This is normal. I still get out-of-state entomologists even that are coming out to the Black Hills for vacation. And they'll call me or email and say, well, you know, I stopped in pear and you've got a real bad emerald ash borer problem here. And I said, no, we don't. We just have a real bad site. And ash will grow there, but it's going to let you know it's unhappy about it. Well, what else do we have going on? Well, for all you folks in the Black Hills, pine and graver beetles are out flying, and they have been doing so for about a week or two, or even a little bit longer, depending on where you live. They're very small. And by the way, they're the cousin to the mountain pine beetle, that beetle that caused a tremendous problem for almost 20 years. That destroyed just millions and millions of trees in the Black Hills. It's a native insect doing what a native insect does. But it really thinned down the population of trees, and by doing so, it kind of ate itself out of house and home for a bit. But right now, that little cousin, the pine and graver beetle, is out going after trees. Now, this is a slash pile, and you see them a lot in the Black Hills. They'll thin out the trees. pile the brush quite often, but this one was done too late in the year. This one was done in March. The problem with going out there and thinning in March, which we tell people do not do, is that pile is going to be green in May. And it was. I went back and visited the same pile last week, which means it's going to be very attractive to the pine engraver beetle. And that's what they prefer, because they'll love to attack this because it's green still. So when they have their eggs will hatch and they'll live very happily underneath there. But the problem is, once they emerge in about 40 days, it'll be too dry by then and they can't reattack it. And unless they can find new brush, and if it's a drought, they're going to attack the surrounding trees and they can kill them. And we really are having an outbreak of pine engraver beetle. You know, people say, well, I think that mountain pine beetle is killing my trees. No, it's not. It's the pine engraver beetle. And if we had adequate rains like we did, I think in 2019, the trees are healthy enough that they produce enough sap that this beetle will never be able to successfully attack them. But now that we're in a drought period, they're not producing enough sap and they can easily attack them. This is the piles that you see. You'll see this little boring dust on them. That's the adults burrowing in to the slash in this case. The first generation tends to go for downed wood rather than standing trees. It's that second generation we're going to see in about 40 days that are probably going to go to live trees if they're stressed, which means if our drought is continuing. But right now, when you pull all that powder away, you can see where they burrowed in, and there's the galleries. And you'll find them again in that nice, fresh, yummy phloem tissue just beneath the bark. They're on that kind of white sapwood there, and it's very moist still in these piles. And what you'll find is this sort of gallery pattern, which is very unique. What it is Dad finds the tree. Okay, he goes, or in this case, the log, and says, you know what, this is healthy, this is green, good place to raise a family. So it'll start to burrow in and it'll release a pheromone that calls in the females. And so the male picks out the tree in this case and calls in the females, usually about 3 females, and they mate in that center there. And once they're done mating, the females want nothing to do with that guy anymore. And they each go on their own way and develop their own little gallery. And you can see that here where they've all gone out from that central point. And they lay eggs along the edge. And if you look closely, you might even see a couple of little egg niches. Now, the eggs haven't hatched yet. That's going to be in a couple more days. And then the larvae will burrow out from there, feeding along. And once they completed their feeding, they'll pupate and then become adults sometime in around 4th of July, the way it's looking. And then if it's still dry, they're going to go for trees. And that's why we're telling people that if you have really valuable pines next to your house and you have a problem with pine engraver beetles in your area, you may want to have your trees sprayed professionally because you got to have sufficient pressure to get through the whole tree. Otherwise, your trees are going to look like that by the end of the summer. They'll attack them and kill them. Now, again, only under drought conditions. If we get a lot of moisture, which it doesn't appear we're going to, this is a non-starter. So water. Oh, one more little pest here out there. Our tent caterpillars. This is the western tent caterpillar. It looks different from the eastern tent caterpillar. The western tent caterpillar wears a larger belt buckle. That's a joke. But it is found West River, while the eastern tent caterpillar is found East River. But they do the same thing. They make this nice little nest, and they're venturing outside their nest right now. A lot of cherries in that. They're still very vulnerable to pesticides, but they're getting to the size where if you spray them, it's really revenge spraying because they'll have done most of their damage. In fact, at this point, I would still recommend the cotton candy approach. You just stick something into that nest, twist it, so you got a cotton candy stick, and that takes all the cover away from these little tent caterpillars, and all the parasitoids that are trying to lay eggs in them can find them, as well as anything else that eats them. And that'll probably take care of the problem itself. Oh, and then I get calls on these. I'm finding these mushrooms, toadstools coming up in my yard. And quite often people mention a very important fact, and that is we're finding them around an old stump, or we're finding them where there used to be a tree, such as an elm. These are inky caps. And they get the name because as they disintegrate, they go into this black and almost ink-like mush. And if we have a moist summer, they'll actually keep coming up all summer long, but it kind of goes with the moisture. And we've had enough moisture. These are popping up everywhere. And quite often they'll keep coming up for 15 years after the tree's gone because they're feeding off all that decaying organic matter from the tree. I will mention, because some of you will Google it, that some of these are edible. Google's a bad place to get information on something that could kill you. And so if you say, you know what, I'm going to go out and try to eat these because I read you could eat them, don't ever go out and do mushroom hunting unless you're going out with an experienced mushroom hunter who's going to collect with you and for you and explain the difference. Pictures are not enough. And again, some of them will flat out kill you. So you want to be perfectly sure you're collecting the right ones at the right time. And just one other little point, even the ones that are tasty and edible and most people can tolerate without any tummy upset, if you have any alcohol with them, that changes. Now, there's some of you that can drink and eat at the same time, but for a number of people, they can eat the mushrooms. But if they consume them with alcohol, they get a very bad reaction. So again, my point, I'm telling you, these are coming up around trees. I'm not even going to go into how to tell the edible ones and the not, because that would give you enough information to be dangerous. And that, so these, just mow them off. They'll pop back up until it goes dry. Oh, Beetlegeddon, look at that hillside. All the needles are gone. Now, this was last August, just after the bikers left. And this is down by Pringle. Whole hillsides completely defoliated. And I started getting calls right away. What is going on? And finally, somebody sent me some good pictures. And in fact, I got them as I was driving out. And I go, oh my goodness, that's the pine looper. Now, I haven't seen the pine looper since 2002. The previous outbreak was 1972, and I didn't see that one. I didn't live here at the time. That's how rare it is. It's always in the forest as just an occasional moth or two. But every now and then, what about every 20 or 30 years, the population explodes and they defoliate entire hillsides. And that's what we were seeing. And that's what it looks like. Pretty ugly, isn't it? It almost looks like a little twig. And they sit there and munch on every needle, new needles, old needles. And then they, as they're finish up one tree, they drop to the ground, go to the next tree. They were crawling up houses. They were crawling across lawns. I mean, you know, people sit in a lawn chair and they're crawling up them, trying to decide if they're a pine needle or not, apparently. So it was annoying as well as devastating to the trees. The trees were just horrible. Now, I told people that, don't worry, for one, it was too late to spray anything, and we normally wouldn't spray for it anyway. You don't see it. And I said, the trees will come back. And this is the picture I took last week. Now they are starting to come back. They are producing new buds and new needles coming out. And if we keep getting rains, these trees still can recover. In fact, I saw very little problem with pine and graver beetles. They go after stressed trees. So far, it's a good thing. So the trees are going to recover. The new needles are going to start coming out. If we keep getting adequate rains, everything will be fine, except this. Look at that. Looks pretty ugly, doesn't it? That's the pupae. And they overwinter as these in the soil, where you think, oh my gosh, the mice must be able to get them. And normally they do, and we only see one generation, 1 year, and then they disappear again. The trouble this year was, or is, as I was going through, yeah, you'd find a few that were eaten, but you could go foot after foot and be able to pull these out, and they're all wiggling. They're alive. And so I don't think we're going to get enough predation or pathogenic fungi to finish them off. Now we're going to set up light traps in June to catch the adults. And if we find we're catching a lot of adults, we've already told the landowners, we will tell them. And yes, this year they have advance notice and they should spray, because your pines aren't going to be able to take 2 years of this defoliation. So it's kind of a stay tuned right now. The population may still collapse, but it's getting less and less likely as we're getting close to the emergence date of the moths. And they're night flyers, you won't see them. But again, if we get a lot of adults flying, we're going to get a lot of eggs, and we're probably going to get a larvae, and this will be like 72, where there was actually 2 years of defoliation. And I think I end on that. So I'm going to stop sharing. But pretty cool, man. I mean, literally, you're walking there and they're wiggling at you foot by foot. I thought I was in some 1950 horror movie, you know, the land of the living dead. But
there's a very, very small subset of people that will find that cool and not terrifying.
yes. And by the way, for you, and only you could relate to this, being another bug person, is the entire hillside smells like a bottom of a cup that you use to collect insects in. Yeah, entomologists know what it smells like.
Yep.
It doesn't smell nice,
Yeah.
but the entire hillside looks like that. I mean, smells like that. It's, I hope they're going to die, but there's not too many things that are going to kill them in the next few weeks, I'm afraid. So we may see a second year of defoliation. So anyway,
yeah, for some of those
like
large populations of insects, you're kind of hoping for some moisture, so some of the various like pathogens can like run through them, but
yeah,
the pathogens need moisture too. So
on the other hand, and only bug people would like this, is that if you look at the literature, there's 2 papers. Because it fades that quickly. And if we do get a second defoliation, we got a paper because we're able to collect a lot more data. And I'm not making light of the problem for the landowners there. It is quite serious to them, and I get that. That's why we're trying to help them. But on the other hand, it will be nice to be able to collect more data on these, because there's more that isn't known than is known about this insect. All right.
Yeah, and we've got a pile of questions for you. I'll give you some of them now, and then we'll do some of them at the end. But you're totally right about it is very hard to be a tree and peer. I mean, I see a lot of people making bad decisions with trees, and then they're like, why is it
that
dead?
is, they planted them.
Yeah, I'm like, because it's a tree in peer. Like, I have trees in peer. It's tough. But somebody asked, what's your new favorite drought-tolerant shade tree?
Okay. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and it's worth mentioning again. And this would be a tree for peer. How's that? And that is Northern Sentinel honey locust. And I say that because it was actually a selection from a South Dakota honey locust. It's very well adapted to our climate and our soils, and I do mean peer in that case. It's more upright, and it seems to be very, very much ice and snow tolerant as well. It is available, so you can buy it as opposed to it's going to be released. I don't think you'll go wrong with that tree no matter where you live in the state. So, you know, just so I don't leave all the peer people with, well, there's no hope. Here's a tree that does well, and you do have some nice looking honey locust in peer as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, Northern Sentinel honey locust.
Yep. Nice tree.
I might have some space opening in my yard that needs a tree, so I will keep that one in mind. Going back to the ash issues, when you have water suckers growing on the trunk of an ash, is that a symptom of EAB?
That is a symptom of EAB, but it's a response to the tree being stressed. And I say that because we'll also have water sprouts occurring if you hit the tree with a lawnmower too much, or if it's been damaged by ice storms or snowstorms. So it's a general reaction to stress. The stress can be emerald ash borer, to the point that, yes, when we see water sprouts, that, and if the tree is infested with EAB, you will see water sprouts. That's probably my best way of phrasing it. But you can see water sprouts on trees that are not infested. I think that makes sense. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right, we'll save the last couple questions for the end, but I'm gonna go through my bug apocalypse slides.
All right, it's all on you.
So let me hit the right S button. Share screen. There we go. Okay. So, all right. It looks like everyone should be able to see my screen. So awesome. Yeah, we're going to start out with a little bit of moth madness. We have been seeing bunches of moths like in garages, flying up to doors, like in between. If you've got a screen door or a glass storm door and your main door, you open your door in the morning and it's just cloud of moths. I am not immune from this. The moths have been setting off my home security cameras at like 5:15, 5:30 every morning. I see the notification and I'm like, oh, cool, a moth. But yeah, these guys are, for the most part, sort of harmless, structurally or people-wise. My cats have been having a great time. There were 2 that got in the house yesterday, and it was like the absolute Olympics with the 3 of them going after this moth, and it made the mistake of flying into Weasley, and Weasley ate it immediately. It was fantastic, not for the moth. But these are probably kind of a combination of species, one of which is the Western bean cutworm. So they kind of all sort of show up, and if you're a soybean plant, they get to be kind of annoying, but sort of residentially, we just have these like collections of moths that end up in a garage. They don't really want to be there. They're not feeding or reproducing indoors, but they are kind of a nuisance. Just open the doors, let them fly out. It's not really anything that you want to get out any sort of insecticide spray on, just because you would have to like douse them. And at that point, you should just use a broom or some other mechanical method. So we got some moths. And in keeping with the alliterative theme, I did notice that a couple different communities are starting their area-wide mosquito management program. So I figured now would be a good time to mention some things that the homeowner can do for mosquito management. One of the big things is removing habitat for them. So mosquito larvae can reproduce in very small amounts of water. So this is when, you've gotten your garden in, hopefully, but now's the time to be making sure that you're emptying bird baths every couple of days. If you have any other water features like a pond or anything like that, make sure that you are treating those for the larvae. There are larvicides. The BT Bacillus thuringiensis derived products that are just specific to fly larvae, so they don't have a ton of other non-target effects, but those can be great choices for water features where you can't empty the water frequently. So look into those mosquito dunks. I talked about bird baths, gutters. Make sure that your gutters are free flowing, because it rains a little bit and then it maybe doesn't rain for a while. That's enough water up there that mosquitoes can complete their life cycle. Insect development is temperature dependent. This is why John goes over the degree days every week, and the warmer it is, the faster mosquitoes can develop. So looking for, play equipment, swings, tires, even if you've got trays underneath any of your potted plants, making sure that you're emptying the water out of those and not just letting it sit in between watering. Like, good for the plant, good for managing some other things that like moisture, and also good for making sure you don't have a mosquito breeding habitat going on. Also, wear repellent. I've included the link for the EPA website where you can kind of search by what kind of critters it's protecting against, how long the protection lasts. Also, you can look at all the different active ingredients available. There are active ingredients that are botanically derived and have been tested and labeled by the EPA. So there are non-DEET options for folks who are trying to avoid that product. However, honestly, I find DEET to be very effective. So if you're looking for something that you don't have to reapply frequently, that active ingredient might be a good choice for you. Again, going off of my rant last week, please don't douse yourself in essential oils and call it good. go get yourself an actual adult repellent that has been labeled by the EPA, has the instructions for use, and has been shown to actually repel mosquitoes. We are going to be getting into West Nile virus season here, probably another couple of weeks, but with mosquito activity ramping up, that also means our vector species are going to be active too, and you don't want to end up with an additional sort of mosquito vector disease on top of the annoying mosquito bites. One thing too that you can do is modify when you're active outside. I noticed that the mosquitoes in sort of my neighborhood like to start biting at about 8:30, 9 o'clock, depending on the cloud cover and sunset times. So when you're outside during that dusk kind of time, that's when you sort of are a prime target for mosquitoes, especially some of our vector species. So wear the long sleeves, wear the repellent, and then do what you can to eliminate mosquito habitat on your own property. And moving on to, I did realize that I was putting a bunch of M words in titles and I just put them all together because I thought it was funny. But moving on to the monarchs, so some fun insects. I shared some of the eggs that I had collected out of my yard a couple of weeks ago, and I'm happy to report that I now have 5 very hungry caterpillars. 4 of them are pictured here. But you can see, if you're looking to do a little bit of, insect rearing at home, entomologists use a lot of basic household equipment. We use plastic storage containers a lot. The biggest thing is you just want to make sure that you're sort of cleaning out the old leaves, shaking out the frass. You can see the tiny little black dots. Those are the little tiny caterpillar poops, which will be getting bigger the bigger the caterpillar gets. So you do want to kind of maintain a sanitary environment so that you're not ending up giving your little charges any sort of diseases. But yeah, I'll keep the Garden Hour audience posted as they develop, and hopefully in another couple of weeks we'll have some adult monarchs that are being released back into the wild to go make some more monarchs that will eventually head to Mexico. And for folks who are butterfly enthusiasts, I came into my office today and found my own very own copy of the 2nd edition of the Field Guide to Butterflies of South Dakota. This book was originally published in 2002. I picked up my first edition in like 2013, and then shortly thereafter it became really hard to find. And Game Fish and Parks was finally able to get the 2nd edition out there. So it is for sale through South Dakota Game Fish and Parks. So don't be scammed and go on like Amazon and pay like a ridiculous amount of money for these books. But you can go to the gift page with Game Fish and Parks and give their office a call and order your own copy of the book. So if you're into butterflies and you want to know sort of everything there is to know about butterflies in South Dakota, it's a really great resource, has a lot of great pictures. So highly recommend that. And the more folks that get their hands on a copy, maybe the more that will get printed this time. And for folks who are, master gardeners and stuff, that is one of the books that I include on my reference list almost every year. So I was glad to see that it was republished. And I wanted to end on some biocontrol. So for folks that might not know what some of these critters or things look like or what they are when you see them in your garden, I was actually at East Pier, just down the road here in Pier, over the weekend picking up some plants. And as I was perusing the peppers, I looked down and I saw that there was a ladybug pupa. So that's the image on the right. So that sort of orange thing with the black dots, that's actually going to turn into a ladybug or a lady beetle. So if you see those in your garden, go ahead and leave them alone. That means that you've got ladybugs. They're going to be emerging soon as adults, and all the life stages, the nymphs and the adults, will all eat aphids. So if you see the little, ladybug like alligator, the nymphs out there, let them do their thing. And then if you see these pupa, let those develop. Don't disturb them. Don't, move the leaf or anything. If they're on a weed, just let it go for a little bit until those come out. And then on the left is an image of another pepper leaf. So it's been a good week for peppers, apparently. But a client sent this one to me, and they were wondering about the aphids on the underside of the leaf. And you can kind of see some of the little green dots there, there are some aphids, but if you look in the bottom left corner, you'll see that sort of tan little shiny spot. That's actually what we call an aphid mummy. So that's what happens when an aphid gets hit by a parasitoid wasp. So it's this little teeny tiny wasp that lays its egg inside the aphid. The wasp larva develops in the aphid, and then it uses it as sort of its like pupal case. So a little wasp is going to emerge from that aphid if it hasn't already, and then continue sort of that life cycle of, attacking other aphids nearby. So that's the thing that if you see it, hold off on any sort of insecticide applications. If you see the aphid mummies, if you see the ladybug pupa, if you see the lacewing eggs, I'll maybe have to talk about them in a future week, but there's all sorts of critters out there that if you're seeing signs of them in your garden, hold off on any sort of chemical control, because those insecticides are going to be non-selective. They're going to take out your natural enemies, just like they'll take out the aphids. And those aphids are going to bounce back a whole lot faster than your natural enemies are. Because as we've talked about before, or I've talked about a lot, aphids have asexual reproduction during the growing season. A lot of the species do. So the aphid moms are just like giving birth to live young sort of continuously, and you're not going to kill every aphid. So you'll end up with their populations rising faster than, say, the neighborhood ladybugs can sort of recolonize your place. So if you see some things like this, feel free to ask questions about them, but keep an eye out in your garden. There might be some insects out there that are actively helping you. So that is my last slide.
Well, hey, I got a question to you before you move on.
Okay.
And when I'm done with my question, you've got to answer the buffalo gnat question, because that's annoying everybody. So you can close with that. But I got two things. First of all, the bug juice I used to use decades ago, 50 some years ago, was 75% DEET, and it would take paint off things and melt stuff. Is the higher formulations of DEET any better than the lower? I don't even know. Well, I'm sure you can buy it, but I'm not sure I would use. I mean, you used to douse yourself in it every day, but
oh yeah, no, I absolutely had a bottle that took varnish off of a table.
Yeah.
So that is a great question, and you don't need to go crazy with percentage of DEET. The 10 to 15% products are going to be just as effective as carrying around and they don't have the side effect, sort of the, ripping the paint
it's
off
staying your
things.
hands.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally stain your hands.
Yeah, so you don't need to go sort of the higher concentration is not sort of better as far as efficacy, and especially for a lot of what people are just doing. If you are somebody that's going to be in sort of mosquito country or tick country for an extended period of time, like you're going on like a 1 week backpacking hiking trip, consider treating your clothing with I want to say it's the permethrin, doing the permethrin, you're right. Doing that treatment. So you can treat your outerwear, you can treat your pants, you can treat your, your shirts or whatever, and that'll last through a couple of washings. And then you don't have to keep reapplying a repellent. So there's repellent technology, I feel like, has come a long way, but yeah, you don't need the 100%, 75% DEET.
So it's not like sunscreen, higher numbers better.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Now answer the gnat question. It was one asked here in our group.
Oh, and I had a question in my email about the gnats too. Where are these gnats happening in South Dakota? Because I mean, Pierre might
everybody
not be
but Pierre.
I know,
my
yeah.
gosh.
I mean, people
and
give
Brookings
Pierre
are flying up your nose when you're out there working at this time of day.
So that's the thing with some of these flies. They just don't respect the rules of engagement. They don't care about repellent. For some of these, really, a physical barrier is the only thing. Like if you're having to be outside a whole bunch, get the bee bonnet thing, put the screen over your face, might be the only solution. You will look very interesting doing it, but otherwise you're going to be getting a lot of additional protein in your diet.
Now, the other thing is these seem to be, it's kind of like when I lived in Maine, you had the black flies, and it was just something you had every May. These seem to be about the early part of June, late May, early June, every year, out here at least, Brookings area, and then they go away after a few weeks. So could you tell us about their life cycle or that? Are you familiar with them at all?
again, we're like the weird oasis. Pierre has not had the issue with these guys. But yeah, so some of these fly species have an aquatic life cycle. So their larvae are actually in water systems. So if you are, so that's, I think sometimes that prairie pothole region, you know, there's a lot of water up there that you don't necessarily see. So which supports, you know, cool things like dragonflies, but then also all of these gnats.
And they are just terrible.
Yeah, and so kind of a little bit too with like the mayfly logic of they're all sort of emerging at once, so you've got a higher chance of reproductive success. And then yeah, they're sort of not as short-lived as a mayfly. That would be great, but yeah, sort of like that 2 to 3 week sort of peak activity time, and then they're done for the summer.
Thank goodness.
But yeah, no, black flies too. I know when those kind of come out in the Pierre area, they just don't respect insect repellent. Like they just do not care. So that can be really difficult.
Yeah. All right. Well, you answered my question then.
All right. Okay. The person saying about repellents with vanilla work for gnats, unless the EPA has said that, please don't just use vanilla for repellent. Difference between Colorado potato beetle larva and a ladybug larva. Oh, that's a great question. So they're in 2 different families, but they're very closely related. Sort of if you were keying them out, the difference between the potato beetle family and the ladybug family is like the number of tarsi on like the hind legs, you know, so I get why they look very similar. I might have to include some pictures the next week that I am on Garden Hour, because that is a great question. Potato beetle larvae, they have like a really chunky abdomen, and they're going to be very much feeding only on like solanaceous plants. So they're going to be on your potatoes, your tomatoes, your peppers, those kinds of things. Whereas ladybugs have sort of a more slender larva that are going to be like booking it around because they're predators, and they're going to be sort of actively hunting. So the potato beetle larvae are going to be sort of more sessile or like stationary as they're munching on the leaves, whereas the ladybugs are going to be sort of faster and more active. Potato beetle larvae are sort of that peachy kind of mauve color, and they've got some little black spots down the side of their abdomen, whereas the ladybug larvae are going to be sort of that overall sort of dark color, maybe with some red spots, and they're going to be a little bit spiky in appearance. And I always say they kind of look like an alligator. But I will try to remember to include some pictures of the 2 of those side by side in an upcoming Garden Hour, because that is a great question. Let's see, small piece of copper pipe in the bird water. You still have to change the water in your bird feeders, not bird feeders, but in your bird baths. Just, you know, copper, that kind of stuff is not going to be any sort of like long-term or tested deterrent. So change out that water. Also because like birds, like you get like feathers and like bird poop and stuff like that. So like for the birds even, change the water out. They will appreciate it. Let's see. All right. It looks like, John, we have a couple questions left for you.
Oh, all right.
Before we close, are pine engraver beetles a problem in Sioux Falls?
No, but I'll say they're in Sioux Falls. Pine engraver beetles are actually found statewide. Typically, there again, as long as we're getting adequate moisture, which is less of a problem here now, not in Yankton. We rarely see them to be a problem, but back when mountain pine beetle was at its peak, people East River were reporting mountain pine beetle when it was actually the pine engraver. So yes, it is possible to find them in Sioux Falls and windbreaks throughout the eastern part of the state.
And then let's see, we've got someone with a Scotch pine that lost about half its needles following ice and snow. Branches are stripped, but there are buds. Will they recover?
I'm going to have to give you the may recover. And the reason being is the loss of a lot of needles means that not only they lost their ability to manufacture food, but they actually store some food in those needles. So they're starting out empty, if you could. And if they were a healthy tree beforehand, yes, they probably will recover. But do keep in mind with Scots pine, pine wilt disease is killing them across the state. So they might survive this, but they're stressed enough that Sawyer beetles come in and it has pine wilt disease and still dies.
And then our final question is about an apple tree. There's a young apple tree with 2 leaders guessing that they need to remove one. Also, no lower branches, so the tree looks like a topiary.
Yeah, and the topiary problem is you're just going to have to let nature take its course, but absolutely you want a single leader rather than two. Ideally, that would have been done just before bud break. I prefer to see that sort of pruning done then. We can do midsummer pruning, but in this case, I would just put a Post-it note somewhere on your refrigerator that says, April 1st, go out and prune one for next year, and otherwise just leave it for this year.
All right, well, we are caught up on questions and we are almost out of time. So as we close out this week of Garden Hour, go back around the panelists and see sort of what they're looking out for in the upcoming weeks. And Whitney, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for drying herbs, or just general where to look for stuff when you're preserving it from the garden?
There we go. Nope. I am so thankful that you guys had me on here. It was a very awesome experience, and I learned so much about bugs that I didn't know before. That was awesome. I hope that everyone learned something about drying herbs, and if you have any pictures or success stories, I'd love to hear about them. So, happy gardening.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely going to try some stuff in my dehydrator this year. So, John, things to look out for in sort of the coming weeks.
Well, I like what Whitney just said, because, I've got a big backpacking trip at the end of the summer for about 6 days. And, I'm liking this idea of drying some of the stuff. So I'm eating these meals out of a bag. They might have some flavor. But for me, it's going to be heading back West River and looking at problems there. But quite honestly, the next week, I expect to still be answering a lot of questions dealing with the winter and the spring, the cold temperatures we had, followed by warm and then cold, which again is raising havoc. A lot of our maples are half dead. A lot of trees are still dropping leaves, such as hackberries. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can spray for winter in South Dakota.
I'm a little bit concerned that all of your camping snacks might end up tasting like onions, though.
And I'm good with that. If they made an onion flavored peanut M&M, I'm in.
Nobody shares snacks with John. Well, awesome. Sounds great, everybody. We will be back here same time next week, 7 p.m. So feel free to join us. And if you have a question and we didn't get to it, or you think of something right after this ends, you can always email us, or you can submit it through our Ask Extension widget on the SDSU Extension website. So thank you all for joining us. Wear your EPA approved insect repellents, and happy gardening.